Good evening. Except for some obvious stupidities, the social credit government of Victoria is still enjoying a honeymoon with the people of B.C. Let's see if we can ruffle the honeymoon bed on tonight's program. But first, here's Ted with a rundown.
Cochlear implants, being performed in Canada since 1982, allow sounds to fall on deaf ears. With details on the procedure, which could affect 25,000 profoundly deaf Canadians, otolaryngologist Dr. Dietrich Schwarz and Dr. Patrick Doyle. They're coming up with Webster. And Webster later will call for a free-for-all. But first, is Claude Richmond off the hook with his remarks about welfare parents taking jobs or losing their kids? What does the NDP have to say about the SOCRED approach to social services? Darlene Marzari, MLA for Vancouver-Point Grey, and Joan Smallwood, MLA for Surrey-Guildford-Whalley, are on the set with Webster.
There's no doubt about it that Claude Richmond, the new welfare minister, I'm old-fashioned, I'm calling him welfare minister, appeared to put his foot in his mouth with that take a job or lose your kids. And I had him on the other night. And before I turn to my guests, though, I want to show you a little clip from Richmond to see if they now believe he has cleared it all up for them, for these NDP people. First, so show me the Richmond clip. The position now is, before we get down to detail, if any welfare recipient refuses a job, you will not, in any circumstance, seize their kids. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The point I'm making is that down the road, if I am a really awkward single parent or welfare case who turns down these voluntary jobs, you might well call me in and say, that's it, Webster, off welfare.
No, because your two kids are better off with you than they are anywhere else. They're still better off with you.
And cheaper for the government.
And cheaper. Why do we want to take children? That's the other thing. The Vancouver province seems to have a feeling that we love taking people's children. It's the last thing we want to do. They're far better off in the home if they're safe, if they're not at risk.
Here now is Joan Smallwood, the newly elected NDP member for Surrey-Guildford-Whalley. And here is, to me, a familiar face, Darlene Marzari, the newly elected NDPer for Pat McGeer's old seat in Point Grey. Now, what do you now think of, what's his name? I can't get his name, Richmond's program, the pilot program in Kamloops in Surrey? Did he put it out properly, and do you trust him and believe him?
Well, first of all, Richmond's an experienced cabinet minister. If he didn't mean to say those words, then he shouldn't have said them. And he's really caused a great deal of undue stress to people in my riding. My constituency assistant, the day that this announcement hit the newspapers, was barraged by phone calls of parents panicked that their kids were the last thing that they had, that they've lost everything, and now that indeed was being threatened.
Now that he's made some explanations, do you approve of his pilot programs?
Well, his program is, quite frankly, it's a computer program, and what can you say about a computer program? Other than, number one, if he's talking about matching recipients with jobs and training, what jobs and what training? In my community, 60% of the jobs are commercial jobs. That's retail clerks. That's low-paid, low-skilled jobs. Training, there's long waiting lists for appropriate training, and the training itself doesn't cover the spectrum that's needed in communities. It doesn't address community needs. It doesn't provide opportunities for people to get off welfare in the long term.
Darlene Marzari, you've been around a long time in the social service. You've a Master's of Social Work at U.B.C. Do you think Richmond deserves some credit for what might be a new social credit approach to this problem?
Jack, you've been through it as many times as I have in the last 15 years. Once a year, or at least when every new social credit minister of human resources or social services comes onto the scene, there's a program that cuts some people off. They target their group, the most vulnerable groups, usually the disabled, the single mother on welfare, and the aged or the kids. And they say, you're off. Whether you're picking mushrooms somewhere, whether you're a single mother. We had 81. Grace McCarthy knocked off the single mothers out of the unemployable rolls and made them all employable. They all lost $50 a month just because of that. They lost daycare, they lost job training because of that, and that's the way it's been for 6 years, and that's the way it still remains under Richmond's program. PrEP. You remember PrEP,
Oh,
76?
yeah. Ron
This
Stu.
is no different than PrEP. This is matching people through a computer with jobs that don't exist. And we remember how that sunk soundlessly, as the newspaper said in 1980. You remember Van der Zem. That was Van der Zem's program, by the way. So it sounds to me like Richmond's been listening to Van der Zem. Van der Zem said, choose your target area and bully them, because they're not going to get people off welfare, because welfare rates and rolls are exactly equivalent to unemployment rates and
Well,
rolls.
you two as practical NDPers, with the government with $1 billion shot right now this year to run the government, do you say that if you were in power, you could do anything other than the facade of a program such as he's talking about, $300,000 computerized program, perhaps to match people to this and that if they're singles on welfare?
Let me respond to that by saying, first of all, that I really feel sorry for Claude Richmond on this one. I think that his caucus has hung him out to dry. The only way that this government can deal with the situation that people find themselves in this province is by putting together an economic plan that will provide jobs and a strategy for this province that will address alternatives to poverty in this province, address it by supporting people in their search for alternatives, in family services, in education, in real jobs, a strategy that will provide real
Well, even
jobs.
the NDP couldn't wave a magic wand, could it? Not even your new leader, if he ever gets declared new leader.
Who's promising a magic wand, but with $3,000 that ostensibly is going to create jobs that we know.
$300,000.
$300,000 that's going to create jobs that we know it won't create. You can do a hell of a lot with $300,000 to provide family support services in the metropolitan region of Vancouver.
Well, now, he picked yours and he picked Kamloops because you're the two of the heaviest areas in the province with single mothers. I think it's 1,500 single parents, 1,500 in Kamloops and 2,200 in Surrey.
Well, I'm glad that he recognized we have a real problem in Surrey. Poverty is at the core of my riding. Poverty is a very serious problem. But what I'm looking for is not the paring down of welfare rolls, but I'm looking for real alternatives. I'm looking for solid job proposals. And if the government themselves don't have all the answers, the very least that they can do is develop a commitment to consult with people, to talk to the opposition.
Well,
we'll help them work it out, to talk with the welfare recipients, the people in the community.
Oh,
that
he's
have
got all
them.
kinds of experts. Social workers, surely they know the score.
I dare say that the social workers will be furious when they hear about this matching with a private company. And the private company will be given access to files, and people who don't play along with their matching techniques will be reported on to the ministry. I think that this is a breach of confidentiality, and the professionals will be up in arms about it.
A good point, mind you. He gave me the guarantee backed away altogether from the province headlines, all the way backed away. So at least he can't do that now, unless a child or children have to be seized for some other proper reason, right?
There also is an effect, though. Sure, he's backed away from it, but he has effectively intimidated and people on welfare, so that they are going to think twice when welfare calls them up and tells them that there's a job, a waitress job, or a cleaning job that they could have. I mean, what are
I
these
was
people going to
surprised
do?
when he told me, though, that social welfare, whatever they call it, pays $18.5 million in daycare. Is that not a fairly substantial move by the government, which has developed over the years? Apparently $214 a month for each young child who goes to daycare?
No, that's not $214 a month for each child who goes to daycare. There's 137,000 children in this province who need some kind of care, and there's only about 19,000 licensed spaces. The subsidy rates have been cut back. The number of parents who can now receive subsidy are very, very limited. If you're married and you're a student at U.B.C., and your wife is a student as well, you don't qualify for a daycare subsidy. One of you does, the other doesn't. I'm telling you that the daycare situation is in worse shape than it's ever been. There have been virtually no spaces created in the last 5 years.
Except in the places which have money, like Vancouver City Hall, U.B.C, SFU.
Well,
but they're not for the people who really need it, are they?
Well, I'm saying that no spaces have been created, virtually no spaces.
What about welfare rates? When they were raised a little bit, shelter was raised a smidgen recently, was it not?
About election time.
Yeah. Prior to that, when was there a raise in welfare rates?
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
Do you think this government can afford to raise welfare rates when you've got a social credit right-wing government, although he seems to be a little less right-wing than he used to be, Van der Zem?
Well, that's the
Would
rhetoric.
you-
That's the rhetoric.
Would
yeah.
you
Well,
raise the rates?
Welfare dollars are paid with 50-cent dollars. Canada Assistance Plan contributes 50 cents to every dollar we put into those welfare rates. That money is spent locally. That is local money that doesn't get saved. It doesn't get
Right.
salted away in some Swiss bank account. It is spent locally. If anything, we should be keeping those rates consistent with some minimum standard of living. They are as up to
All right.
60%
Let-
below
I'd-
any
I'd
kind
like
of standard.
I mean, the point here is not a balance sheet, a dollar and cents, as much as it is a moral issue. We in our society now have huge lineups at the food banks. We have people that can't afford the bus fare to go to their doctor. Some of our seniors can't get proper treatment. Is that what we want for our society?
No.
And if it is not what we want, then we have got to get a little more creative than this kind of blackmail and intimidation in solving these problems.
Joan Smallwood, NDP, Surrey-Guildford-Whalley, and Darlene Marzari, Vancouver-Point Grey. Your questions or comments to them after the break. Can't resist this, Joan. I noticed that you're the leader of the Canadian Abortion Rights Action League.
Well, I think that's a bit of an overstatement. I'm an activist and supportive of.
Okay, do you know that Mr. Van der Zand told me that he believes that more than half of his cabinet are pro-lifers? So far, I've spoken to 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Does that upset you?
It does?
Does it upset you?
I think it's appalling, just appalling.
I mean, pro-lifers shouldn't be given cabinet positions.
I'm saying that pro-lifers have to be very careful about how they bring their individual biases to bear on public policy.
Especially federal legislation. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Mrs. Smallwood, you made a comment earlier on the show about out in your riding, all of the jobs that are available are retail clerk jobs or somewhat low-type jobs. What is the problem with the people on welfare taking those jobs? And should they have a small child, their daycare be supplemented? It seems to me that you don't want them even to start at the bottom like most other people do.
Well, what I said was that 60% of the jobs in Surrey are commercial jobs and that they are low-paid, low-skilled jobs. What we're talking about here is that women that are on welfare, that have children, have responsibilities, and often those jobs don't pay enough to be able to cover their medical services, their transportation, their new wardrobe, the care for their children. They often will be worse off with a low-paying job than they would be if they stayed on welfare with that kind of support.
Go ahead, please.
Just one question to all 3 of you. The question is not whether this government can afford to raise the welfare rates and supplement some of these poor people's incomes. Can they afford not to do it, Jack? You almost sound like you're apologizing for these guys that they've bankrupted this province and they can't afford to do the decent thing.
If you think I'm apologizing, you're particularly stupid and thick-headed. That's a silly remark. I'm here as a provocateur on many occasions. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Jack.
Good evening.
You're a great provocateur. Your guests seem to be provocateurs a bit, too. I have 2 questions. One, why call this program blackmail and intimidation when, in fact, it is voluntary, and to boot, they get a wardrobe allowance for a new job. This is built into the system. I don't understand why they're calling it blackmail and intimidation when it's voluntary. My second question to your guests is, they talk about daycare shortage, et cetera, but the fact of the matter is, in Vancouver alone last week, the Y had to close down its daycare center because it's been running at 45% capacity for the last year.
Okay, let me take that first with Darlene. Darlene, do you happen to know the score on the Y downtown?
Yeah, I'll tell you the score on the Y downtown. It was an emergency daycare center. It was one of the only ones in the province. It's very difficult to staff an emergency daycare center on a per capita per child basis because you don't know how many kids are going to be there. So unless you've got a solid core grant that lets you run the thing, then you're stuck every month trying to meet a payroll that you can't meet because you don't know how many kids are walking through the door. Now, we don't give core grants in this province, even though they would be 50-cent dollars if we did.
You mean every time we gave a daycare grant of $500 or $50,000, we automatically get 50 from the feds?
Yeah, but we don't give a daycare $50,000. We pay per the kid. The kid on subsidy gets
How
the
about
money
answering
on
the
his
question
head.
on blackmail and intimidation?
Okay, we'll go to
Okay.
that right now. I'm running the program, by the way, and I hadn't forgotten it.
Okay, what I'd like to do is to quote Mr. Hewitt. Mr. Hewitt is the gentleman that is running the company that is providing this pilot program for the government. He says he has two responsibilities to the ministry, two obligations. One, that his obligation is to report people who didn't take advantage of his company's services, and two, to report people who turned down jobs. There's no point in reporting if the social services is not going to do something with that information.
Well, they could report the information to them and say A, B, C, D, and E, 5 out of 50 turned it down. But your point is that appeared to indicate indirect intimidation.
There's one. Number two, the act that governs social services says that people have to be actively looking for jobs.
And you agree with that?
And I agree with that, totally. The problem I have with it is it does not recognize the responsibility of government to support people in getting off welfare in the long term.
And if you are declared employable, which all single mothers were declared in 1981, the first thing that happens is that you lose your daycare, you lose your job training, you lose certain medical benefits, and you lose $50 a month.
You suggest that's happening now, today?
It's happened since '81. There's been no change in policy. Richmond hasn't put a word on paper that changes the policy. He's doing a bit of glitz and glamour and a soft shoe around existing policy. That's what's going on. And I'll tell you what that means for a single mother with a kid. Instead of getting $691 a month, she's getting $656 a month.
Wish I'd asked him that question. Are you sure on that? Does that still extend?
Single mothers are now declared
Am I employable if I have 2 kids?
You're employable if you have 2 kids over the age of 12.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, like the ladies are saying that the people can't take these waitress jobs and stuff. Just how much money do they have to make before they can get off welfare? What is a sensible amount of money where they can quit off welfare?
Good question.
The groups that are working, the anti-poverty groups, when they take into the full gamut, housing, feeding their children, transportation, and so on, say that a woman cannot afford to take a job under $6 an hour.
$4 an hour is about the same as what you'll get in welfare in many circumstances.
It's $8,000 a year, about there. That's minimum wage, working 40 hours a week.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster.
Yep.
Yeah, I myself am the father of 2 young boys, and I have a wife who we both, try and strive and get ahead. And our problem being that, I see all of these folks are always trying, people are looking for subsidies. Myself, how I do it is my wife will work at night and I'll work in the day, and there'll always be one of us at home with our children. And I think that's sort of the best quality that you can offer both your family as well as yourself.
Well, it seems to me a bit of a shame your wife has got to work at night while you're working at day, but that's the economic reality
Thousands
of
of
life
people do that.
in this country right now, is it not?
And what that means is that the woman looks after the children during the daytime, and then she goes to work in the evening. So we're talking at least an 80-hour work for her.
Go ahead from Castlegar.
Yes, hello. I'm an unemployed mechanic. I'm married. I've got 2 kids, and I don't happen to have $300,000 to hire a firm to help me find work. I was wondering if somebody there could suggest to me how Mr. Richmond expects me to be able to compete, under these circumstances.
Absolutely. What he's doing is spreading around poverty. People on welfare will be encouraged to take these jobs, and they're the very same jobs that are listed on the UI job postings.
Unfortunately, I don't know how many job vacancies are unfilled. There's always a floating number of jobs going around, but we've got, 13% unemployed, 18% unemployed in Kamloops. What is it in Surrey?
Significantly more. I think that in North Surrey, one of the stats that I've seen recently is we're looking at something like 35% youth unemployment. I mean, that's abysmal.
So, as I said before, the numbers of people on welfare escalate according to the unemployment. In 1981, there were 22,000 single parents, I believe, on welfare. Now there's 35,000.
35,000. I nearly fell off my chair.
Yeah, 35,000.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to accuse the NDP of not being very good lateral thinkers. They want to have a universal daycare, but don't you think that in so doing, you're going to have encouraging people to have children before they can economically justify it? You're going to have more single mothers. You're going to have more young couples having children because they realize that they can depend on the government.
And secondly, and I'll hang up, I fully appreciate Claude Richmond's endeavors to help get the second and third generation welfare recipients off the roll.
Thank you.
Well, number one, I'm sure that the same arguments were used when universal education was brought in, so that kindergarten kids at age 5 got to go to school. Hey, wouldn't this encourage people to have more kids, and wouldn't the pro-lifers love it? Okay, and the second point is these second and third generation families. The reason that these programs fail so miserably is because MHR and social service officials constantly forget, and ministers constantly forget, or they want us to forget, that in the main, social service recipients, welfare recipients, are temporary. That in fact you're looking at 6 to 12 months for the most part. So that the single mother wants a job. She's going to get her kid to the point in time when she can, in fact, take that low-paying job. And that's what happens.
A loaded question, though. In fact, Marjorie Nichols wrote a brutal column about it.
That's right.
With the abortion attitude of the social credit government, do you anticipate there will be more unnecessary single mothers on welfare?
Well, the Premier prior to Christmas was talking about the abortion issue, and he said if the reason that women can't keep their babies is because of economic reasons, because of poverty, then he's going to have to find money to do that. And then, bam, right after Christmas, what are we doing? We're cutting women off welfare and taking their babies.
Well, they haven't done it yet. Now, you're overstating it there.
I'm quoting a newspaper clipping.
I know, but he corrected it. To be fair to Richmond, he says, no, he won't do that.
Nonsense.
You don't necessarily trust his lips.
I am saying that when an experienced politician makes a threat, there's a design. There is a design implicit, and a lot of women have been bullied and intimidated by this kind of schoolyard nonsense.
And let's talk about job creation. Let's talk about providing good quality daycare.
When are you going to have a leader for your party?
April. We've got a leader now.
Who's going to stand up in the House as leader?
Bob Skelly is going to stand up as leader.
He's a lame duck.
He's going to help us set our agenda and carry us through to April.
Fair
and
enough.
that is the
Anyway,
way it is.
Enjoyed your
and it's going to be a good
here.
caucus, and it's going to be a good opposition, and I'll tell you that right now, Jack.
What's your position in the shadow cabinet? Education?
Post-secondary education.
Post-secondary education.
Yep.
And all your degrees are legitimate.
Absolutely. I didn't mail away for them.
Little private joke. My thanks to Joan Smallwood, NDP Surrey-Guildford-Whalley, and Darlene Marzari, Vancouver-Point Grey.
Thanks,
Thank
Zach.
you. After the break. Unusual kind of program for me to do this time of night, but I think you'll like it. It's about the Pacific Otolaryngology Foundation. And I want to introduce you to two eminent medical men, Dr. Dietrich Schwarz of U.B.C. and Dr. Doyle, Patrick Doyle, St. Paul's Hospital, also a professor at U.B.C. Now, what the hell is otolaryngology?
Well, it's very simple. It's ear, nose, and throat.
And I could say that instead of otolaryngology. But you're an otolaryngological expert, is that correct?
To some extent, yes. I'm a scientist rather than Dr. Doyle is a practicing.
You're a practical otolaryngology expert.
Yes.
Now, I want to see the picture of the girl just up on the screen, because there she is over there. Now, tell me about that patient and what you did for her.
Well, this girl lost her hearing about 2 years before we saw her. She had an attack of meningitis, and as a result of that, she was totally deaf, could not even use a hearing aid. We inserted a cochlear implant, an electrode, into her inner ear, and she's been wearing that now since December of 1982. And although her hearing isn't normal, she is able to hear sounds.
Now, tell me about the cochlear implant. Now, does this kind of... Oh, first of all, can I take the little cochlear implant and hold it up? You don't mind if I hold it up? This is the cochlear implant, right?
That's the piece that is implanted in the patient's...
all of it?
Yes, that's implanted behind the ear, and the little wire travels...
Show me where, Doctor... you're the surgeon. You show me where it's...
All right. I'll fit it on to
ear.
Dr. Schwarz here. It fits in the bone behind the ear.
You dig a hole in the bone and put it in?
We dig a good-sized hole, and then this wire runs through the mastoid, through the middle ear, and is inserted into the inner ear.
That's his aerial, you might say.
That's about
That's
it.
his connector. And then?
And then he wears this signal processor, and attached to it is a microphone, The microphone picks up the sound, carries it to the signal processor where it is turned into an electrical impulse. It travels then back along this other wire to the external coil, which is held to this one by a magnet, and that sits behind the ear.
On top of this?
On top of that, and it transmits the electrical impulse through.
All right, now tell me, when you've done that, with this device, can you cure all forms of deafness?
No, you can only treat deafness provided that a fair sample of cochlear nerve fibers is still alive.
Go on.
That is to say, the nerve axons that carry the sound after it has normally been transmitted by mechanoelectrical transducers, by special cells in the inner ear, must be intact in order to be electrically stimulated. If these nerve fibers are gone due to disease, then the deafness cannot be cured by this kind of device.
Now, are we talking about a specific kind of deafness with this cochlear implant?
Yes, total deafness. This means that they cannot hear even the loudest sound, even with the most powerful hearing aid.
But even though you can do, does that mean that any deaf person who has got some nerve fibers still alive can benefit from this device?
May well be a candidate for this device.
May well be.
We're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 Canadians.
25,000 Canadians. Now, in 10 seconds, we're going to roll the before picture, and you'll see this girl being asked questions prior to the implant. Now, let's see it. Listen closely.
I've lost my car keys. Don't know. Is his neck clean?
That one either.
The baby laughed and laughed.
It's raining outside.
The clown was very funny.
So there we are, Dr. Doyle. That was taken without the implant, correct?
That's right.
Now, what's going to happen when we put the implant in? So we watch and see the incredible difference in her responses. You can roll that anytime you like now. The same girl.
I'm going to say a sentence to you, and I want you to say it back to me.
Okay.
Do you like apple pie?
Do you like apple pie?
Will you wash the jam off?
Will you wash the table off?
What time is it now?
What time is it now?
Did you buy groceries?
Did you buy groceries?
Is your dog sick?
Is your dog sick?
It's quite fabulous, isn't it?
It's dramatic, isn't it?
And that's a local girl, is it?
She's from Tumbler Ridge.
From Tumbler Ridge. And now, had she lost her hearing, or had she always been very deaf?
No, she had lost her hearing only 2 years previously. So that's why her voice is so good.
What about, has it been done yet to people who had no speaking voice, intelligible speaking voice, prior to the cochlear implant?
Some attempts have been made to implant devices like that into children prior to the learning of speech. But the results, of course, up to this time are very much worse than in this particular case. We believe that people who have not been capable of hearing and of speaking prior to their deafness do not possess the necessary brain structures to compute the sounds properly, and therefore cannot benefit as well. However, they will very likely perceive noises and thereby the time patterns and loudness differences, and thus even for people who cannot understand speech, the implant will be useful.
Okay, I have Dr. Doyle here from St. Paul's Hospital and Dr. Dietrich Schwarz from U.B.C. And they're going to tell us a little bit more about the Pacific Otolaryngology Foundation. And I might try for some calls on this. What do you think? Think we might get some calls on this?
I think we might.
We'll try it anyway. After the break. Dr. Doyle, how far advanced are we in British Columbia in this kind of research? Are we really making good progress?
Well, we're fortunate. Our Pacific Otolaryngology Foundation, which we organized for the purpose of being able to finance research in this area, has been able to finance us to get Dr. Schwarz. Dr. Schwarz is undoubtedly one of the leading researchers in this area, and he has been, in the world, and he has been working virtually full-time toward the development of a better implant, one that the individual will be able to hear normal speech.
How close would you be to that? Now, that girl, when she was listening just now, she could make out the words perhaps with some difficulty.
That girl would not, in fact, understand the words themselves, but she would take the artificial sounds that you would not readily recognize as words, and is being retrained to utilize them together with lip reading to understand speech.
And you're actually, in this day and age in Canada, you're actually appealing for funds for research so you can continue this work.
We want to develop an implant that we can put into, for instance, the child who is born deaf and is condemned to not ever learn proper speech. We want to be able to implant that child and allow them to hear normal speech and develop normal speech.
That hasn't succeeded anywhere yet. Do you think that's feasible down the road?
I think it's not only feasible, I think it's critical. If children are not deaf children deaf at birth are not provided with some sense of hearing very early in their age, they will lose the brain capacity to develop language skills, and thereby they will lose a great deal of what we consider to be intelligence.
Where a child has some hearing, you can amplify it with all kinds of hearing aids, right?
Yes. Children or adults with some hearing, aidable by hearing aids, are not candidates for
this kind
implant.
of thing. Good, I understand that. For people who are virtually, would you say stone deaf?
Stone deaf.
You're allowed to say that now.
Yes, you are.
Not bone deaf.
No.
No, stone deaf.
Not deaf and dumb.
That's what you're not allowed to say.
That's
They're
right.
not dumb. They may be deaf, but that doesn't make them dumb. Yeah. We're much more sensitive than we used to be, aren't we?
Right.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Doyle. I have had a stay-piece reconstruction in one ear, which completely failed. And I wondered, does this mean that the nerves are dead, or would this operation be suitable for me?
The operation is not suitable for you because you're able to talk on the telephone.
Yes, but it's the other ear that's still
And
dead.
you have to have two totally dead ears in order to qualify for this procedure, because in its current state of development, it does not provide hearing anything like normal hearing.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I have a granddaughter who's been deaf since birth. Now, how do you determine the amount of nerve damage there is? For this implant, you say that there must be some nerve there. How is it that you determine the amount?
It is possible to stimulate the ear in a minor small surgical operation electrically from the outside without going into the ear itself, actually.
Yes.
And there are electrical responses generated by the brain when the auditory nerve transmits signals. These potentials can be picked up by computer and allow us to some extent to estimate the amount of nerve fiber survival. However, I must caution that this test is crude.
Yes. Now, she lip reads and went through school, went through high school lip reading. Is there any place that she can go to have this test done?
I turn this to you.
She has probably seen an ear specialist in the past. If not, then...
Many of them.
Yes. Well, you could discuss this with any ear specialist in British Columbia, and they would be able to tell you whether or not she is a possible candidate.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm probably taking up unnecessary time. I think my question's been answered. I had a mastoid when I was 3 and lost hearing in that ear, but I do have one good ear. And I believe you said the operation could not be used if you had one good ear.
Following mastoid surgery, it's unusual to have a total hearing loss in the ear. It may be a problem with the middle ear or the ear bones, the 3 little bones. And if that's the case, sometimes it can be reconstructed by a different type of operation than this. But no, you would not be a candidate for the implant.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Doyle, I wanted to know, is there a minimum age limit for the operation, say a 4-year-old?
Up until the present time, we have done this operation only on post-lingually deaf adults. That means individuals who have lost their hearing after they have attained speech. There's 2 reasons for this. One, that the implant was in an early stage of development and we did not wish to experiment, if you will, on children.
Mm-hmm.
The other is that the rehabilitation required for somebody who has never heard is much greater.
This child had heard. She lost her hearing a year ago to meningitis.
Well, in that case, she may well be a candidate and should be evaluated at least to determine that.
Thank you.
Okay.
And now, who knows, we might create a rush of business that you don't really want at the moment.
Well, those 25,000 are spread all across the country. So
we've got 2,500 here.
So we probably have 2,500.
2,500 here. But this procedure isn't done on a daily basis or anything, is it?
By no means. We've done 13 in 4 years.
13 in 4 years. Take a long while to catch up. Although who knows what the techniques might do.
As the techniques improve, and there'll be more people doing them.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, my father is 72 and has Meniere's disease. I was wondering if this procedure could be applicable to him sometime in the future.
Unfortunately not. Meniere's disease doesn't usually cause a total loss, and it's the dizziness that's the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my question doesn't have to do specifically with the implant, but I hope it can be answered. A friend of mine has partial hearing loss in the sense that at certain frequencies in the higher range he can't hear, and he's tried hearing aids and finds that everything is too loud. I'm just wondering if it isn't possible to determine which frequencies somebody has poor hearing in, and then specifically design the
hearing aid
system to only amplify those frequencies.
Well, that's a whole different subject altogether, isn't it?
In a way, but it's another area of research that Dr. Schwarz is interested in, and I think that we should ask him for a comment.
What about that? Hearing aids seem to be, in many cases, a snare and a delusion.
Well, that's quite true. The reason is that hearing aids are, in a sense, just simple amplifying devices.
So could we amplify just the frequencies that are needed to be amplified?
We could develop hearing aids that do even more than that would determine the critical elements of, say, vowel sounds, and only amplify and transmit those, leaving all the noisy compartments away. But that would require a separate...
That's a little ways off yet, is it?
Just a minute. That has not been developed anywhere yet in the world, has it?
No.
That would be the greatest boon to the biggest majority of people who have lost certain hearing ranges.
Yeah, well, this fellow,
Okay, no, I get your message. I know what I'm talking about, too. But nobody's working on that. People are just bringing out new, fancier, more expensive hearing aids that don't work.
That's
my assessment.
That's a straight assessment of fact. In fact, we do research into the necessary coding for speech sounds, which is the fundament upon which such better hearing aids could be developed.
So you're going to start an appeal for money?
Yes.
Well, I wish you well. I've been telling you about the Pacific Otolaryngological Foundation.
Excellent.
Based on St. Paul's Hospital, correct?
No, it's...
And U.B.C.
Yes, that's right.
Best of luck. Enjoyed the program. It's nice to do non-controversial things which might be of some value to somebody watching for a change. My thanks to Dietrich Schwarz, and my thanks to Dr. Schwarz and Dr. Patrick Doyle. I'll be back with a free-for-all whatever comes what may. If I can annoy you, good and well. If I can make you happy, just as good. After break. I've got to repeat otolaryngology, and the other one otolaryngological. Two of the most difficult words I've ever come across in my life. Rather pleasant to do that kind of story in a good cause. Very impressive, the whole business. Every now and again I have a free-for-all, as you know. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I wish I'd got you earlier. I'm a single father out at U.B.C.
Yes.
There's a few points I'd really like to clear up.
Make them.
Firstly, subsidies, the daycare subsidies, the maximum subsidy only covers about 2/3 of the daycare cost.
Do you get $214 a child?
When my son was in daycare, I was getting $225 subsidy, and the daycare costs were $340 a month.
Now, are you at school on loans or grants, or are you working partner? Eh?
Yes, I am.
So how much? What was your income altogether?
My overall throughout the whole year.
Yeah.
With loans and grants, it's about $11,000.
And you can barely get by on that.
Barely get by on that.
Just the one kid?
Yes. Also, I had a summer job. Last summer, I took a summer job for $6.50 an hour, which is well over minimum wage.
Right.
And yet, after making up the additional daycare costs and taxes and medical costs, I was breaking even with what I would have had if I were on welfare.
Oh dear! But of course, you finished U.B.C. now.
No, I'm not. I'm still in school.
Thanks for your call. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yep.
I'd like to try to get when Mr. Richmond was there. I have a daughter that moved down from the north. She was born here in Greater Vancouver, and she gets $652 for herself and a 4-year-old. Her rent is $405, as she couldn't bring her furniture and that. So it comes down, she's left with $70 after fares. She's looking for work, and she's sending out resumes. I've been driving her around. She gets a BC med, and it comes down to $1.40 a day plus $1 a day for the child's family allowance.
Is she another single parent?
She had to leave a very bad situation up north, an alcoholic situation. And so she can't have cable. She has quit smoking during a time of stress, but it's pretty hard to live on. Yesterday she paid $11 for a prescription for her daughter, and the welfare will not give her anything, and she's trying to work, and she's getting UIC because she worked, all last year. And it doesn't seem like it's fair.
Yeah, you've got to be living in those circumstances to realize how traumatic it is, and best of luck. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster, I tried to get on when you had the NDP people on there, but didn't quite make it. My complaint is we got a retired Sandy. He's on full pension. At Christmas time now, he worked for Salvation Army ringing bells, collecting money for them. Made $500 some odd dollars 1 month. That was before deductions. For that month, they cut him down to $40 only from his full pension.
His full pension's what, about $390?
It's just over the 400, Jack.
Just over 400.
Yeah, it is.
And they took away took away his next allowance.
That's right, yeah, except for $40. What incentive does it give these kids? He's a guy that's tried. He's been to all the schools for retarded.
How old is? Can I ask how old he is?
Yeah, he's 23 years old now.
Oh dear! And they got himself a job for Christmas with the Salvation Army, ringing bells, made $500, and they took it all away but $40.
That's right, exactly.
Oh dear! What can I say? Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack. I wanted to find out why you didn't have Art Lee on during the provincial election.
I did so too. Boo.
Oops, sorry.
Bye.
I missed it.
No, some people are real. Go ahead, please. Oh no, wrong one. Wrong one. Follow your orders. Go ahead, please.
That Jack?
That's you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the doctor, Jack, but I was very interested, and I couldn't hear your program because I've had an acoustic neuroma.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's only applicable if you are stone deaf but have some electrical life in the fibers of your cochlear gland.
Yeah, but I know a person who's totally deaf. He's had 2 acoustic neuromas. Would that be, you don't know if that would be helped. Can I phone this Dr. Patrick Doyle?
You, St. Paul's Hospital.
At St. Paul's?
Yep.
Thank you very much
God
indeed.
bless you. You should do it through your own ear doctor if you have one. But never mind, phone him anyway. Don't tell him I told you to call him at the hospital. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yes, Jack. I'd like to comment on the mothers that find themselves supporting children on welfare. Seems like every time this subject comes up, it makes the public look down on these people, that these poor mothers are leeching off welfare. My question is, where are the fathers of these children? Why are they not spending some money to bring up these fathers and make them pay? I mean, you know, it's a two-way street.
Every year we have a new drive, new legislation, nailing the fathers, but the father, meanwhile, in many sad cases, has left his wife to go to live with another woman who has left her husband, and she's got 3 kids, and the father is looking after the 3 kids of his second relationship. And it's almost, I think, if the truth were told, it's not worth the money chasing husbands unless they are well established with money and can be nailed in court easily.
Oh, yeah,
The way there's no money in the relationships, it's a waste of time, and it's easier and better for the woman to collect the welfare and not be up and down to family court.
In some cases, you're probably right, that there are people around, and you probably know some. I think we all know at least one.
We see them in the papers every now and again.
And there are fathers out there that could pay, and they aren't paying. And
No, I know that, but the system, our court system is clumsy,
And you're talking
lumbering,
about
awkward.
him living with a woman that's got other children. Those aren't his kids. Let them go after the father of those kids.
No, you never end, and everybody would be in trouble. That happens more often than I care to think about. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Hello.
Just want to make a suggestion. I was listening to the welfare recipients, and I would suggest that you bring on your program a young single mother that's on welfare and a single mother that's working, and compare them and see who lives in poverty more so.
See who what?
Who lives in poverty more than the other.
You mean it's the one that's working?
Yes, I would think so, because
I
I'm
strongly
a single
suspect-
parent, and I brought up my son, and he's in U.B.C. right now, and I know poverty more than anybody else. And I've gone through it, and I never was on welfare. I worked, and I worked hard, very hard.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's about all the time I've got tonight. What else? Oh, yeah, I've got to take a break. Take it away. Tomorrow I've got Peter Puck, best described as a former Tory prime ministerial candidate and entrepreneur. May Guttridge on the homeless caper. And Robbie Knievel. Whatever happened to Evil Knievel? That should be good fun too. Anything for a laugh. At 5 p.m. precisely. Stay tuned for the news hour.